Hey, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk About It, real conversations about behavior, development, and supporting young children.
We're your hosts, Amanda and Amy, and we're just so glad you're here.
Today's episode is called Let's Talk About Behavior versus Development. Before we dive in, we want to share a little bit about who we are. I'm Amy Hercules. I am an early childhood mental health consultant, which means I go into the classrooms to support teachers to help them understand behavior and give them strategies to help the children be successful. I'm also a triple P provider, which means I provide a positive parenting program for parents in home or really wherever they're comfortable. And I'm also a certified family peer supporter, which means I can attend IEP meetings and other school meetings and just kind of help families navigate through the process and get more support.
And I'm Amanda Ames. I'm a registered behavior technician and a disabilities coordinator. I support early identification and inclusive services for young children by coordinating those screenings and referrals and services in response to behavior-based strategies and, utilizing the data collection and supporting our staff by coaching them to support their social emotional development.
This podcast is for parents, caregivers, teachers, and early childhood professionals supporting children from birth to age 5.
So each episode is short and it's practical and it's intentionally non-judgmental. So please just listen and enjoy your time.
Yes, this is not about any kind of blame for behaviors. It's just about understanding behaviors and building confidence. So let's start with a common question we hear. Is this behavior normal or is it a concern?
And the answer is often it depends. It depends on the child's development, their stress level, and of course, their skills.
Young children are still learning. They're learning how to wait. They're learning how to communicate. They're learning how to manage their emotions and handle frustration.
So behaviors like tantrums, impulsivity, or testing limits can be part of that typical development. Tantrums are strong emotional outbursts. We see them all the time. They're usually crying, yelling, dropping to the floor when a child is feeling overwhelmed. And they happen when there is limited language to express the needs, lack of self-regulation skills. It could be fatigue, that they're tired or they're hungry. They may not respond well to transitions in a schedule or just being frustrated. Tantrums are developmentally appropriate. We have to remember that. These children are very young. This is their prime time of learning. Tantrums typically peak between the ages of 1 to 3, and they decrease as the child learns those communication and regulation skills.
So impulsivity is acting before you're thinking, before you think, and we all do that sometimes. But with our little kiddos, it's very common. It's part of their development, and that looks like things like grabbing, running, hitting, blurting out. The brain areas that are responsible for impulse control, they're still developing. Those skills are not there yet. And this impulsivity is expected through preschool years. Children aren't choosing to be impulsive, they're building those skills. So those skills will improve with modeling, practice, and time. The adult's role is to just provide structure and reminders, visual cues, and opportunities to practice waiting and self-control. And above all is just to remain calm and patient.
Now we're on to testing those limits. Oh, man. So testing limits are repeating behaviors to see how adults will respond, especially when the adult is saying no, or actually, I take that back, when the child says no, when they want to break those rules, when they are pushing those boundaries. It happens when children are learning those rules and expectations, basically seeing what they can get away with. So, children are needing that consistency to understand those boundaries. And different responses from adults invite more testing. Limit testing is part of healthy development, and it increases when routines change or expectations are unclear.
So I'm going to give you a good example of testing the limits. And remember, this is completely common. It's completely age appropriate. So let's say you're at the table with your child, and they're having a drink of water or milk, and you ask them, "Are you done?" And with the drink, and they start to kind of pour, start to act like they're gonna pour the drink on the table, and you give them the direction or the directive, "No, we're not pouring the water on the table." And they kind of look like they're going to do it again, and you say, "No, if you pour the drink on the table, the cup's going to go in the trash can." And then the child looks you straight in the eye, and they look at you, and then they just pour that water right on the table. And then you take the cup and you throw the cup away, and the child blows up. That is a good example of testing, just testing the boundaries. It's important to follow through. You got to say what you mean and mean what you say. So, and the child's going to get upset, but they have to go through that process to test those limits, because they're young and their skills aren't developed yet.
So the adult's role in response to this type of behavior is you have to respond consistently. You have to hold those limits calmly. Okay. When you're regulated, the child will eventually be regulated. When you are, when your behavior escalates, their behavior will escalate. So it's very important that we stay calm and we teach those expected behaviors without having those power struggles. These behaviors are learning behaviors. It's not misbehavior. It's consistent, supportive adult responses that help children build those regulation, self-control, and trust. Now let's talk about stress behavior.
So, stress behavior in young children, ages birth to 5, it's how they communicate feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or unable to cope with demands in their environment. So, it is a little bit different than a normal, typical behavior. This is when they're exposed to stress and then how they respond to it. Because self regulation and coping skills are still developing, it stress often shows up through behaviors like meltdowns, withdrawal, clinginess, extreme separation anxiety, aggression or regression in skills like toileting, language, sleep. Stress behaviors are typically triggered by changes in routine, sensory overload, fatigue, being hungry, being sick, or expectations that exceed the child's abilities. It can also be caused from changes in your environment, in your family. If someone, you know, if families are going through a divorce or someone's sick and things like that, stress behaviors will typically occur. These behaviors are not intentional behaviors, but it's a sign that the child's nervous system needs support. They just need more support. When adults respond with being calm and predictable, and you provide supportive strategies rather than punishment, those behaviors will typically decrease. And children are better able to regain their regulation and learn appropriate coping skills over time. Now, sometimes, even with consistent routines and calm responses and supportive strategies, stress behaviors may continue or begin to increase. When this happens, it doesn't mean that someone has done something wrong. It just means the child may benefit from additional support beyond the home or the classroom. That support might include working with a consultant like myself, or a behavior specialist, or a counselor, or a therapist who can help identify the triggers, teach coping skills, communication skills, and support adults in responding appropriately and consistently. Early support, you guys, it's meant to strengthen those skills and to reduce the stress, not only for the child, but also for the caregivers.
Before we move on, I do want to add that, how Amy had talked about, let's respond early. It's best to respond early because if we respond later on, past those crucial first years of a child's life where that learning is taking place, it's going to be even harder for them to understand and build those skills. It's easier when children are learning at such a younger age than it is later on in life. Um, but going off of that, in those moments, behavior is communication. It's not manipulation. Young children do not yet have that brain development, language, or self regulation skills to intentionally act out to control adults. Instead, their behavior is how they express unmet needs, big feelings, confusion, or simply being overwhelmed. They are also, a tantrum may be communicating frustration, a need for help, sensory overload, withdrawal may signal anxiety or fatigue. Impulsivity can reflect a child's difficulty slowing their body or managing excitement or frustration, or even screaming when they just can't calm and relax their body. When we view behavior as communication, our response shifts from how do I stop this to how can I help this child? What is their behavior telling me? This perspective allows the adults to teach skills, provide that support, and build connection rather than respond with punishment, creating a foundation for a long term emotional and behavioral growth.
That's right, Amanda. So just remember when your child's exhibiting big behaviors, it really is about your perception. Listen, guys, your child's not out to get you, okay? They're not out to get their teacher. They're not out to get their parents. They're really just trying to communicate. And we have to remember that those skills aren't fully developed and look at behavior as in what are they trying to tell me? So sometimes behaviors do tell us that a child needs extra support. They need extra support learning a skill, not because they're choosing to misbehave, but because that skill is not necessarily developed yet, or it's just very difficult in that moment. Young children are still learning to communicate their needs, manage their big emotions, and even identify those big emotions. They're still learning how to wait and take turns and cope with frustration, and they're still learning how to ask for help. When skills are missing or not strong enough yet, behaviors becomes the child's way of expressing that struggle. By recognizing behavior as a signal for teaching rather than correcting, adults can focus on building those skills and helping the child through modeling those skills and practice and supportive guidance, and helping them to succeed now and also in the future.
So that doesn't mean that something is wrong with the child. It simply means that the child's brain and self regulation skills are still developing, and the behavior is communicating a need. When stress behaviors show up, they signal that expectations may be too high, supports may be missing, or the child needs help learning those new skills. Our role as the adult is to teach, model, and support the appropriate behaviors through calm guidance, consistency, modeling, and connection, rather than punishment, so children can build the skills they need to succeed over time.
Okay, so before we move on to some common myths, um, an example of an expectation being too high would be if a child's crying and you say, "What's wrong? Why are you mad?" So sometimes that skill is not there. They're not able to tell you why they're mad. They just know that they're mad. And so a way of supporting that child is to look at the environment. Hey, I see that you're mad. Your face is frowning and your eyes are squinting, and that tells me that you might be mad. Did something happen? And then the child might say, "Yeah, something happened," and but they may not be able to tell you yet. So maybe you look around and you see that a toy's broken, and you then say, "Gosh, I see that your toy's broken. Um, is that why you're mad?" And then they're probably going to say, "Yeah." And then you provide that extra support by saying, "Hey, I get that. It's frustrating and it's upsetting when our things break. And so let's see what we can do about that. That's an example of how to acknowledge their help them to acknowledge their emotion, and then help them get to the why, and then help them through the problem solving. So now let's talk about some common myths with behaviors. First, this is one we hear all the time. They're doing it on purpose. Is that, what do you think, Amanda? They're doing it on purpose.
Absolutely not.
No,
Especially children at this age.
right. They're not doing it on purpose, and they're not trying to be difficult. They're just trying to communicate with you.
All right. So myth 2, they'll grow out of it. What do you think, Amy?
Sometimes they do, and then sometimes, like we talked about earlier, they just need that extra support to get through it and to develop those skills.
So with that, early support isn't about labels or putting children in boxes. It's about noticing when a child may need a little extra support and help building those skills early during a time when the brain is growing and changing rapidly. When we support children early, we're strengthening those communication skills, those emotional regulation skills, and coping skills before challenges become bigger or more stressful later on.
Okay, so supporting children early, listen, guys, it'll reduce stress now and it'll reduce stress later, not only for the children, but for families and educators. When kids have the tools that they need to express themselves and manage their biggest feelings, we often see fewer power struggles, less frustration, and more positive experiences at home and also in the classroom. So before we wrap up, guys, we want to leave you with 3 reflection questions. These aren't meant for you to judge yourself or diagnose any behaviors. They're only meant to help you pause, reflect, and think about how you can support young children in a proactive, supportive, and developmentally appropriate way.
So, first question would be, is this behavior across multiple settings? Is it at home? Is it in the classroom? Is it in the community? Or is it showing up only in certain situations, routines, or with specific expectations? Sometimes behavior tells us more about the environment than the child.
So the second question is the child, excuse me, is the child able to communicate their needs? Can they do that with words or gestures or pictures or through their behavior? What are they communicating? When children don't yet have the language or skills to express what they need, their behavior becomes their voice. So really take a step back and look at their behavior and what it's trying to tell you.
All right. And then third, we have what skill would be or might be missing. So rather than focusing on, what rule is being broken, let's, focus on the question that helps us shift from correcting that behavior to teaching the skills like communication, coping, waiting, or asking for help.
When we ask these questions, guys, we move from reacting in the moment to the behavior to understanding what a child's really trying to communicate with us, and how we can support them more effectively.
All right. So, in our next episode, we'll talk about big feelings, not just children's big feelings, but the adults too, and how they impact our responses, our relationships in the learning environment.
Hey, remember, everybody, you're not trying to fix everything at once. Small intentional changes can make a big difference over time.
One small step, one new perspective, and one supportive conversation can reduce stress, build connections, and help children feel safe and successful.
Hey, thanks for listening to Let's Talk About It. Supporting children isn't easy, and you don't have to do it perfectly to make a positive impact.
So join us for new bi-weekly episodes, and remember, supporting children starts with supporting adults.
Remember, this podcast is meant to share general information and support. It's not meant for a replacement for individualized professional care. So see you next time.
Bye. Thanks for joining.